First, we're going to talk about House Bill 592. So prior to House Bill 592 being passed, there are a number of solid waste management issues facing the state. This mostly had to do with a lack of comprehensive regulations and a lack of planning in solid waste management. So, are y'all here now? I'm sorry.
I'm not hearing anything, Jeff, other than when you are talking.
Okay. Had some audio issues, so let me go back a slide or two here. I'm supposed to be the tech guy too, right? There were some landfills with a bad history of operation, and in some cases, badly designed facilities were contributing to groundwater contamination. There was also a lack of consistent and effective enforcement of the solid waste management regulations that were in effect. So these issues and other factors led to the passing of House Bill 592 in 1988. Ohio now had comprehensive regulations governing solid waste disposal facilities, and now Ohio had to focus on minimizing its reliance on landfills. So they're going to do this through reducing, reusing, and recycling. House Bill 592 also required the Ohio EPA director to adopt a state solid waste management plan. Now, through the planning process, Ohio would maximize disposal capacity. And this is where you all come into place. It also required commissioners in every county to establish solid waste management districts. Every county in Ohio must belong to a solid waste management district. So the districts will vary in size. They may be single counties or multi-county. Ohio is organized into 52 solid waste management districts. 33 of those are single counties, 14 are multi-counties. There are also 4 single county and 1 multi-county solid waste management authority. Our districts range in size from as small as 1 county up to 6 counties. The smallest district has a population of 22,000 people, and the largest in the state has 1.4 million. Budgets will range from as low as $50 million to as much as $7 million annually. And some districts have balances with no funds in them, while others may have millions of dollars. So what are the basic responsibilities of solid waste management districts? The district will prepare and implement a solid waste management plan. They'll achieve goals as outlined in the state solid waste management plan. And also they ensure the safe and sanitary management of all solid waste generated within the solid waste management district or the authority. And now looking at the structure of solid waste management districts, they will have a board of directors, and they're made up of the board of county commissioners. So in a single county district, the board would be composed of the county's 3 commissioners. If you have a multi-county district, the board would be composed of every commissioner from each county. So 2 county districts would have 6 commissioners making up the board of directors. A 6 county district would have 18 commissioners. So some of the responsibilities of the board of directors include convening the policy committee, adopting and enforcing rules, establishing rates and charges, ensuring the district solid waste management plan is implemented, hiring staff or entering into contracts for services, as well as designating facilities. The district's policy committee is made up of 7 members from each county within the district. The primary responsibility is to prepare, adopt, and receive approval for a plan. Each year, they should review the district's progress toward implementing the plan. In addition, they will authorize the board of directors to adopt and enforce rules. They also authorize the board to designate facilities, as well as levy disposal and generation fees. Now, the governing body of the Solid Waste Management Authority is the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees will perform the functions of both the Solid Waste Management District's Policy Committee and the Board of Directors. So members of the Board of Trustees are the same representatives who would serve on the district's Policy Committee. And to wrap up the Solid Waste Management District history and structure, I want to mention the Materials Management Advisory Council, which you may hear referred to as MAC or MMAC. So prior to the Materials Management Advisory Council, Ohio EPA had a Solid Waste Advisory Council. There is also a Recycling and Litter Prevention Council, ODNR. So when the Recycling and Litter Prevention Program was moved to Ohio EPA, it became the Materials Management Advisory Council. So the council provides guidance on solid waste issues as well as recycling and litter prevention grants. So members of the council are appointed by the governor to 3-year terms, and the council is made up of members who are stakeholders in the solid waste management program. So on our website, we do have fact sheets about each of these topics: House Bill 592, solid waste management districts, and materials management advisory councils. So if you'd like more information, please check out our website. We can provide those links here with you. But if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer those now.
Okay. It looks like I did have a question come in through email for you, Jeff. And it is, how often should a district's policy committee review progress towards implementing their plan?
So they should review that annually. So that would be something the policy committee would want to be doing. So every year they should take a look to see how they are going toward implementing the plan.
Okay, and there was a second part to that question, which is, what are the uses for district funds?
Well, there are 10 allowable uses. I know Matt is going to cover those in depth later this morning, so we'll kind of leave that to them. But there are 10 uses we'll talk about here in our another presentation.
Okay. Are there any questions anyone has that they didn't get a chance to email or chat in? Okay, doesn't sound like it. So looks like we're ready to move on to our next presentation, which is the Solid Waste Management Plan and Format with Ernie Stahl. Ernie, are you ready?
I am. Let me share my screen. I'm worse than Jeff with technology, so we'll see how well this works here. Just let me know if you can see it.
I'm seeing PowerPoint.
Okay.
Okay.
So good morning. Is that okay? Can you see it, Leanne?
Yep.
Okay,
See it
good.
here, yeah.
Thanks. So as Leanne said, I'm going to talk about our state solid waste management plan, and then I'm also going to go over a document called the Solid Waste Management District Format. So I'm going to start with the state solid waste management plan. And this is my Bitmoji. I gave myself the liberty of taking away my wrinkles and adding a little bit extra hair. So anyhow, so for the state solid waste management plan, it is Ohio's strategy for reducing our use of landfills. So as Jeff mentioned, when House Bill 592 was passed, we were running out of landfill capacity, and there was a lot of concern that we were going to not have any place to take our waste. So part of the goals of 592 was to reduce how much we needed our landfills. The state solid waste plan also sets the goals for Ohio and solid waste management districts in terms of reuse and reduction, and I'll be going over those here in just a minute. It does establish requirements for a number of other things for solid waste management, but a lot of those aren't really relevant today. The law that we're dealing with is, 30 years old or longer. And so some of the things that they had felt they needed to address at the time are no longer concerns because they've kind of been adequately addressed. For example, there's one in there for managing ash that comes from incinerators. Well, we don't even have incinerators anymore. So I'm only going over what I feel like is the most important parts of it. And then the state plan, it's prepared by us working with the Materials Management Advisory Council. We just adopted the new one in end of 2019, so we are operating under a relatively new state plan. There are 10 goals in the state solid waste plan, and while they're all important to solid waste management in Ohio, there's really 3 that we kind of consider as the main goals. The first one is goal 1, which is focused on providing recycling infrastructure. So the goal To meet the goal, you provide recycling opportunities to at least 80% of your residential population, and then just make sure commercial operators have businesses or opportunities as well. Usually, most of the ways that you demonstrate providing access to recycling is through curbsides and drop-offs. And a lot of times you'll hear us refer to the access goal because that's what it's kind of commonly become known as. The second one is achieving a waste reduction and recycling rate. So to meet this goal, you demonstrate reducing or recycling 25% of the residential commercial solid waste in your district. And residential commercial waste is essentially the same thing as municipal solid waste. And I always try to point out that our goal 2 is not the same thing as a recycling rate. So a lot of other states measure just recycling. We measure diversion from the landfill, so things like compost. And if we actually did have an incinerator, volume reduction achieved by that would both count towards achieving that rate. The third goal is an outreach and education goal. So what this is really focused on is making sure that you're providing education and outreach to all of your targeted audiences, all the target audiences, so residents, businesses, elected officials, excuse me. And then the state plan also identifies a few best practices to keep in mind when you're doing that. Really, the overall goal of this goal is to transition from creating awareness to changing behavior. So one of the things we learned when we were writing the state plan is that you can create awareness for people, but if they don't have the opportunity to recycle, there's really the message kind of gets lost. So you need to focus on making sure that people can participate and that they do when it comes to promoting things. So as I mentioned, we have a new version. So it's we call it the 2020 state plan. It was actually adopted at the end of 2019. And in past state plans, we've kind of really done major overhauls to the goals. And this time we really just kind of tweaked what the existing goals from the previous version were, really just to provide additional flexibility to solid waste districts for achieving the goals. And when we did this, we worked really closely with the SWATO to come up with what those new tweaks would be. And we use a lot of acronyms, but that's your professional association that for solid waste districts. So the reason I'm going over these changes for those of you who are new is because your old plan may still reflect the existing goals. So when you write your new plan, you'll need to be aware of the new goals. So one of the things we did was eliminate an industrial reduction in recycling rate. We used to have a goal for achieving a 66% rate. And instead, we replaced that with a program focused on providing actual programs to industrial generators. Rather than bothering them to get data for things they're already doing, it seemed to make more sense to actually help them do more. Another one that was done with the state plan is to reduce the standard for achieving goal 1. Remember, I said it's 80% now, giving the residential sector the ability to recycle. We reduced that to 80%. And then there's also an option for solid waste districts to demonstrate a lower rate through a waiver if they can show that the opportunities they have serve more people than a standard. And you achieve that goal basically through a standard calculation that we have that I'm not going to go over now, but when it comes time to dealing with that, I'll be glad to talk to anybody about how that works. And then the major other thing it did is it established a fairly detailed market development strategy for Ohio, which we will be working on those things as we implement the state plan. So that's really where I was. Yes, I'm sorry, was there a question? Okay, sorry about that. So that's where I was going to leave it with the state plan. I'm going to kind of transition into what a solid waste district, solid waste management plan looks like. And how you go about doing that. So to begin with, your solid waste plan, it's really a long-term strategy for operating. And you kind of do that through a public engagement process. The overall strategy that you come through is 1, to achieve the goals of the state plan, and 2, how you're going to manage all the solid waste that your solid waste management district generates during the plan, the operating time of the plan. The other thing that it does is it really governs the activities of the solid waste district throughout the planning period for your plan. So the policy committee is the one that writes the plan. So they're the ones who decide how the district is going to spend its money, how it's going to earn its money, what programs it's going to offer. It's the one that decides whether or not the county commissioners or board of directors are going to have the ability to adopt rules, which is essentially flow control, where the solid waste district says that our waste can only go to these facilities. This policy committee has to confer those authorities to the commissioners through the plan before they can use them. And then the policy committee or board of trustees, you revise your plan every 3 or 5 years, depending on how many years your plan covers. So if you have a planning period of 10 years, you have to have a max or minimum of 10 years. If you have a planning period of 10 years, you revise it every 3 years. And if you have at least 15 years, you would do it every 5 years. So we have a couple solid waste districts that are on 3-year update schedules, but most of you are on 5. So why do we plan? Well, to begin with, the law says you have to. But there really is a lot that comes out of doing a solid waste management plan that can benefit a solid waste district as well as all of your constituents. So for one thing, it helps the solid waste district remain relevant and responsive. So, districts, just like the state, are funded with public money, and so they're accountable for how they spend it. By going through the planning process, you give your constituents the ability to say, yes, we do, or no, we don't agree with what you're planning, and to provide input into how the district is going to operate and the kinds of programs they're going to provide. It also is an opportunity for you to kind of sell what you do to your constituents and also gain buy-in. So districts do a lot of stuff. A lot of people may not be familiar with your solid waste district, and this is one chance to try to promote what it is you do. It gives you the ability to review programs and services just to make sure that things are on the right track in terms of where you thought they were going to go, to make changes if you need to identify maybe where there's some outstanding things to address. And then it's also a chance to make sure that you're continuing to make progress. So, progress doesn't have to be a major change. It can be incremental, but it is the opportunity to incorporate some of those things into how your district operates. There's a lot that goes into a solid waste management plan. So just to go over a few things, there's an inventory of the infrastructure in your district. So your disposal, waste management, and recycling infrastructure. You provide a current snapshot of your operations. So a description of what it is that you do as a district, kind of an overview of how you operate. You do that based on picking a base year, which we call the reference year, and you provide information for that year. And then you'll provide projections from that base year data. So how much waste do you think you're going to generate? How much do you think you're going to recycle? What's your population going to look like? How much revenue do you project you're going to get? You also describe any future programming that you plan on providing. This is also, again, where you demonstrate meeting the goals of the state plan. So we have those 10 goals. There's actually only 9 that are required and 1 is optional, but in the state plan or in your plan, that's where you demonstrate meeting them. There's a budget to show how much money you're going to earn and how much you're going to spend and what you're going to spend it on. Again, it confers those authorities to the board of directors. And then you provide descriptions of basically all the programs you provide, and then a timeline for how you're going to implement them. The process is very long and detailed, so I'm going to go through this real quickly. This is an example of the Stark-Tusk-Waines update process because they're going to be starting in the coming year. So you start 15 months before your plan is due to us, and the due date is keyed off of the date that your last plan was approved. So in Stark-Tusk-Waines case, their plan was approved in, I think they're on a 3-year schedule, so theirs was in 2019. So their plan is due on 1/31 of 2022. They start 15 months prior to that. Once they submit it to us, Ohio EPA has 45 days to review that, and we issue what's called a non-binding advisory opinion. That's just whatever we see in the plan that it could be suggestions, it could be errors that we find. We have 45 days to do that. From the date that we issue that, then you have another 290 days to revise that, to get it approved by the policy committee. And then following that, you have to go through a public ratification process. And that is a process that takes usually a minimum of 120 days to complete. Then the ratified is then due to Ohio EPA. Following the ratification, we have 90 days to review it, and then we issue an action for that. And then I'm going to talk about this last step in a minute. So from the time you submit your draft to us till the time that you're required to get it approved, you have 18 months. The entire process, if you followed it according to what statute provides, can last up to 33 months. There are districts that do get that done much faster, but that is the kind of the allotted time for getting the whole process done. So it's involved and long. So the next question then is, what happens if you don't get your plan done on time? So there is a due date that you have to have it done by, and that's at the end of those 33 months. If that does not happen, then the law requires us to take over and write a plan for you and to order you to implement it. And I could not find a good picture of Chet, but Chet will come in hot after you if you do not get your plan approved. And believe me, you don't want Chet on your back. So we want to do everything we can to avoid that last step. And we will do whatever we can to assist you during the process as well. So that's just an overview. I don't expect that everybody's going to keep that in mind. So, I mean, at least in terms of all those deadlines. So how can we help during this process? Well, we can do whatever we can when it's appropriate. So, we like to attend policy committee meetings. The earlier you involve us in the process, the more we can work collaboratively with you and avoid issues that might pop up through the process. And the more we're involved, the less comments we may provide after we get your draft. So don't be afraid to involve us. As Chet mentioned, we are not an enforcement-based program. We're not coming to look over your shoulder and watch what you're doing. We're really there to collaborate and help you. Again, other things that we can do, we'll attend community meetings. So if you have a community that you're trying to convince to do something or is questioning whether they want to ratify your plan, or you want us to attend a board of directors meeting or any of those types of meetings, we're available to do that. We can give feedback throughout the process as much as possible. So sometimes districts will send us draft portions of their plans for us to review before they submit an entire plan to us. And that way we can provide comments as you're going. We also, because we oversee all 52 districts, we have a statewide perspective on kind of what's going on, and we're able to provide you with ideas and suggestions, particularly if we know you want to do something, we know somebody else has already done it, we can get you in touch with them so that you can find out how they've handled doing something like that. And we can be a cheerleader when you need it, so we can attend meetings to support you that way. And then we also, a lot of times, are a scapegoat. So when, if there are times when a district needs to, in order to get something done, they need to say, well, EPA is making us do that. And we're happy to take that blame on if it helps you to get done what you need to get done. So again, don't be afraid to involve us. We like to be involved and collaborate as much as possible. The last thing that I'm going to talk about this morning is, I had mentioned earlier that there's a solid waste management plan format, and this is the document that you use to prepare your solid waste management plan. It's kind of a how-to manual for doing it. I like to kind of think of it as the planning equivalent of a permit application for a landfill, although the format is a lot looser than a permit application would be. So it provides the layout for how your plan is going to be. It kind of specifies the content that you need to provide. And it also specifies the information that all the people that you deal with need to know in order to ratify the plan and understand what you're doing. And then it also contains the information that we need to be able to review and approve the plan. The format is currently, we have version 4.1. It consists of 4 parts. There's an instructions, which are a PDF file. There's a working document, which has all of the instructions stripped out of it. It's a Word file that then you can just use to begin entering all of the information that you need to put in. There's an Excel workbook, which helps you manage all of your data. So it has worksheets that are all linked throughout the workbook, and it carries data through so you don't have to enter it multiple times. It will do calculations for you. It provides some analysis tools that are automatically created after you put data in. And then there's a set of instructions for using the workbook. We really didn't want to provide this many different documents, but it got to be an unmanageable size with everything in one source. So it helped to sort of break it up a little bit. We will be updating Format 4.1 to condense it and simplify it. So we are working on that now. I don't really have a deadline on that, but if you go on and if it's time for you to start preparing your plan, if we issue a new format, you're not going to be required then to turn around and use the new one instead of the one you started under. So what the format has result in a plan is a plan that's kind of, there's 2 really sections to think about. One is a first part, which consists of 6 chapters, which summarize what's in the rest of the plan. Think of it kind of like an executive summary where you're conveying the most important information that you need to give to your constituents. And in general, the audiences here are for the general public and elected officials. It's for people who don't need all of the down and dirty details that it's difficult to wade through. It's intended to try to make the plan a little bit easier to read, but let's be honest, it's never going to be a fun read, but we're hoping at least this structure helps make it easier for people to understand. At the back, there's a series of appendices which provide all of the technical information and data. It keeps all that technical stuff out of the way of people who don't need it. The audience is really us, and if you're in other data geeks like we are, then this will be the part that you're interested in as well. One of the directions we went with the current format is to use it as a real planning tool for you. So it provides kind of a module for strategic analyses. It's a structure for thinking about all of your programs and comparing them or thinking them in terms of a lot of different factors. So there's a series of 14 analyses, sort of like mini studies, and they consider all kinds of things that you need to think about when you're preparing a plan. So looking at the effectiveness of your recycling infrastructure, looking at your budget, your revenue, looking at your all of the different programs that you're providing. So it just provides you an opportunity to think holistic about your solid waste district and what it is you're doing. It helps to lead your policy committee through a review of the solid waste district and its programs. So there's a lot, that module in the format is extensive. There's a lot in it. It can be overwhelming when you first look at it. So when you get ready to go down that road of using it, contact your planner because we can help kind of focus your attention in on how to do that without getting overwhelmed. So one of the purposes of analyses is to help the policy committee prioritize what it's going to do under the new plan. So and it also hopefully is increasing everybody's involvement in the planning process in terms of making decisions. So I'm going to go over our thought process with it here in just a minute. But really what want you to use the planning tool as a way to make informed decisions with a strategy that makes sense based on where you've been, where you are, and where you want to go in the future. So if you look at it, the first thing is you do these analysis, which is really just trying to figure out what is it we need to know. In doing the analysis, you're going to look at your programs and their performance. You can also look outside of your district at what other people are doing for similar types of programs. There may be things you can learn from what they're doing from them. And if you know that you're doing something different that's successful, maybe you can share that with another district as well. You use those analyses to draw some conclusions about what it was that you learned. You're going to use those conclusions to kind of come up with, well, what are the actions we could do in order to address any outstanding, like let's say like there's a hole in our program. What kind of things could we do to fill that hole? It's a list of actions that probably is going to be a lot longer than what you could possibly do. But one of the good things about it is it gives your policy committee an idea of the types of things that it could recommend for the new plan in terms of where to go. From that list of actions, you're going to pick the priorities, and these are the things we're actually going to do during the planning period. Again, the number of priorities you pick is going to be probably smaller than what you could do. And then finally, you use those priorities to develop the programs that you're going to address them with. So in summary, you're going to prepare a plan using the best available data that you have in order to make decisions and project results, as well as future quantities of things that you're going to have to deal with. Make informed strategic decisions about what you're going to do over the next at least 6 years, 3 to 6 years. Clearly identify and describe all of the programs that you're going to have available so your constituents know this is what I can expect from the solid waste district. You're going to demonstrate financial solvency and then make a good faith effort to fulfill the intent of the planning process. So just keep in mind, your plan is meant to be a strategy for implementing things. It's not meant to be a strategy for making decisions in the future. We see that quite often in plans, and it's again because you have constituents and public money. You should be accountable for what you're going to do with that. But most of all, it's important just to be involved. The most successful plans in solid waste districts we see are those where they have all of the parties involved. So an active policy committee, having board of directors that's up to speed and supportive. If you're hiring a consultant, making sure that the consultant isn't writing the plan without your involvement. So just be involved, and again, keep us involved as well, because we're happy to help wherever we can. And that's where I'm going to end it, unless people have questions for me.
All right. If anyone has questions, remember you can chat them in, email them in, or use the raise hand feature. I am not seeing anything, but Ernie was worried that he wouldn't have questions, so he asked a question of himself early on. And his question,
myself is going to ask me this question, and then me is going to argue with myself on the answer.
So his question is, if I know I'm not going to be able to get my plan on time, can I get an extension from Ohio EPA?
No, unfortunately, we don't have the ability to issue an extension. The law doesn't give that authority to us. So that's why it's important to keep us involved, particularly if you're running into a problem with timing and it looks like you're going to be running up along that approval deadline. Let us know in advance, because there are some things we can do to help with the timeline.
Okay, we did have a question just come in the chat.
Could I add to that, Ernie?
Sure.
Obviously, you're talking about the final approval deadline, but the draft deadline is, like I said, we cannot offer extensions. But if it comes in late, if it comes in a week late, 2 weeks late, it just really scrunches that time you have to get all your ratification and done. But we definitely don't want to encourage people to be late. But if that does happen, there's no repercussions from us. After a period of time, I think we sent a letter. I just wanted to clarify that you were talking about the final approval deadline is very important in statute, and we cannot change that. We have to write your plan if you don't get things approved by then.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay. The question from the chat is, how many districts do the plans themselves? How many have consultants?
If I had to guess on that, I would say about at least 3/4 use consultants. There's not a ton that write the plans themselves. I mean, it is an involved process. So that would be my guess, about 3/4.
And some do contract just for portions of the plan and write some themselves.
Correct.
Okay. Are there any more questions for Ernie and Matt?
Was that emoji supposed to be you?
Yeah, but as I said, I generously gave myself more hair and removed all my wrinkles. So
Okay, so I am not seeing any questions come in through chat or email. No hands are being raised. So before we go into our next presentation, we are going to give you guys a brief break. So if everyone could be back here at 10:50, that would be great, and we'll move on to the next presentation then. We will get started with our next presentation, which is with Matt Hiddle on Retrack. Matt, whenever you're ready.
Hi, everybody. Matt Hiddle. I am the planner assigned to the most of Southwest and Southeast solid waste management districts. And I'm here to present on our reports submitted through the Retrack system. And I apologize. I thought I was going to get lucky here. My neighbors working from home has this disadvantages. My neighbors are redoing their porch, and there's currently a jackhammer going on right outside my window. And I don't think you guys can hear it very much from what I understood from my morning call. But it's annoying me, I can tell you that. So I'm here to talk about reporting through Retrack, and as such, I wanted to make certain you guys were able to see it from a solid waste district's point of view. So I got permission from Anita Petrella, who's with the Belmont Jefferson Solid Waste Authority, to use her account. Just to use as an example today. So you are required to submit your annual district reports and your quarterly fee reports through the Retrack platform, which is online, and all the login information is provided by us. So I know some people try to go in and join the program on their own, but it really needs to be initiated from our end. So if you do have new employees that require access to this, that you work with us to do that. So we probably prefer to keep the numbers down on the number of people that are in there, but we can create additional accounts. And in general, this is your first page you see. So you should see all the programs that have been assigned to your login information. And I'll start with the annual district reports, and you'll see. So if you were to use like a contractor to do this for you, and they would potentially see multiple solid waste districts here if they had access to them. But our system is set up in what we call surveys, so it's broken into separate sections of the report. So each of these that are marked draft or verified are what the current reporting cycle is. So 2020 is still open because we haven't entered the new year yet. These are due on June 1st every year. Mark that in your calendar. It doesn't change. That's in statute. So I wanted to just talk about saving and to realize that this first one, this contact information is always going to be draft, and we do that for a reason. And that's because employees change throughout the year, and we want districts to have the ability to go in and say if you get a new coordinator or if your policy committee chair changes, this is what we use to reference if we need to send a letter to your policy committee chair. So if that changes, make certain that you go in and change their address and email, or the president and the board and your fiscal contacts, alternate contacts if you have additional people in there. Be sure to keep that up to date constantly. When we know a coordinator changes, we will contact you and update that for you. But when you're in here, you can see down, this actually changed just recently in Retrack. They made some updates to their system. So even those coordinators that have been around for a while, this might look a little different. But down here, you'll see at any point in time, you have the ability to save, and you can mark it as draft and continue to work on it all you want. So realize if you're saving it, it's not submitting it to us. But when you mark it complete, that does essentially close the survey, and it will require contacting us to then go in and unlock it, mark it to draft again for you, which is not a difficult process. So don't worry about it if you need to do that. And this will be the same for the other reports in the system as well. So this first survey in here, that for general information, has has a number of different aspects to it. One is the population. And then we do encourage you to put updated information in here. It should not be the same going from year to year. You can go to your plan and see what you have projected, or you can see if there's updated information from the Development Services Agency, which provides information based upon census data. We also ask that you put information to the highlights and challenges, and you can see this is a lot of information provided in this section. It's not always the case for districts, but we really appreciate, this is our ability to keep tabs on the solid waste districts because even when we are going to visit you guys and it was not COVID, we don't get out to you guys every year. We don't get out to all the districts every other year or even every third year, but this is our ability just to see what you guys got going on. And so if there's issues you guys are having, if you're having financial issues, challenges, we encourage you guys to put as much information as you can here. And subcommittees, lots of people will put like evaluations or subcommittees, pilot projects into their solid waste plans, and we encourage you to upload any files related to those studies here in this section. And lastly, the fees and funding. If there's contracts you have with facilities, we do use this, we do use this information to track where the fees and fundings have made changes. If you have anything outside your general statutory fees, like generation fees or tiered disposal fees. So next is probably the biggest data-oriented survey. And this is the waste and solid waste district waste and recycled. And this is for all sectors, residential, commercial, as well as industrial. And this first section here is all about looking into your plan and opening up your plan and just seeing what you projected as far as your numbers, and if they're off, just see if you can identify some of the reasons why that might be. And it might be, you see they did provide some information here about the industrial sector is lower because the landscape of businesses is changing and manufacturing declined from the last plan update. So that's just sort of a general information on why their industrial projections were off. Now, as you get in here into the specific categories, you can see some of them are usually closed off for the industrial sector for the reason because household hazardous waste is not reported for industrial sector. Used motor oil, the same thing. Electronics, scrap tires, those things are not able to be reported for the industrial sector. If you are able to go and see the survey instructions here, this is sort of, I would say, the Bible of what we look at to understand what you need to know in order to find out what you can report through here. So there's a list in there, and there's a discussion in there about what's credible and what's non-credible materials. And I mentioned hazardous things that may seem to be reported, and you'll get those through your surveys through industrial sector. But the reality is hazardous materials cannot be reported for anything other than HHW, household hazardous waste. And used oil we've included just because a lot of the surveys just do get that information, and we realize that it should be from residential sources. There's going to be some commercial included in those. Try to discern as much as possible to eliminate those numbers, but probably the biggest area of concern is through reporting through scrap yards. And the information from those sources can be very unreliable as far as first making sure that the origin of the materials comes from within the counties in your district, because they usually don't find out that information when they receive them, and also to make certain that they exclude construction and demolition debris, because that is a non-credible material. It's not part of our solid waste. So as the solid waste plan dictates, we measure diversion from landfill. And we have to look at solid waste as the category of what can be diverted from landfill. And lastly, for any of these others, we encourage that the explanations, you want to use this as much as possible. For the other materials, you want to include what that material is when it's other. And lots of times it may come directly from our reports. If you're not familiar with our solid waste management planning page in the resources tab here, this is where a lot of your data will come from. And if you go to data reports and studies, you'll see we have our material recovery facility and commercial recycling data. That'll generally get a lot of your curbside and drop off numbers from that. And the compost facilities will provide your yard waste numbers, as well as a big chunk of your food waste and your scrap tire. Now, the scrap tire is one where we have a law in Ohio that only registered scrap tire transporters can transport more than 10 tires. So in general, your scrap tire number should match what our report says here. With yard waste, obviously, you guys have a lot of communities that will collect leaves and field spread them, et cetera. So you're going to have additional numbers. But for the scrap tire, you generally want to use this as your source for your data. So back to this explanations column. This is something we want to see districts use the analytic, and this is what the same thing we use when we review these. And unfortunately, the analytics is not available from this page. You have to go back to your workspace, and you will see up here the analytics that there's this comparison of recycling amounts from previous years. And we want to see everybody use this and look at your numbers, and it will allow you to put in your current report year, and it'll generate a report that allows you to see how your numbers compare and the percentage difference. If there's something in here that has changed significantly, there's usually a reason why. And it might be something as simple as reporting, oh, we had a large cupboard manufacturer that didn't report wood this year, and that might be the reason why your wood numbers went down, something like that. So we want to see everybody use this analytic when you're doing your analysis and putting information into the explanations column. And we have made an effort these last couple of years to reach out to districts that don't provide a lot of information in there, and to have them at least put some basic information in this explanations column. Lastly, on this page, I just want to go over the sources of data. We generally just want to see whatever data you're going to be getting during the report year. So for 2020 in this case, but you can see this reporter did use information from previous calendar years, and we just want you to confirm, if you do that there was some way that you confirm that these businesses are still operating at the same level as whatever year you received the survey for. So just something as simple as saying, here they by email, they just confirmed that they were still in operation. And lastly is conversion factors used. We do have some conversion factors that you can find in this link, but if you use anything else, you can include that here. Something unique. I know there's Dan Wickerham's on here. He had a grinding formula back when he used to grind people's yard waste based upon the amount of time spent grinding. He would estimate the cubic yards and then convert to tons there. Does anybody have any questions on this?
There was a question about how did you access the analytics comparison?
Okay, that was back from your workspace. You can see up at the top, there's these tabs, and there's the analytics tab. Unfortunately, that isn't available when you're inside of the actual survey. For me as a manager, it is, but for a user, it's not up there at the top. You don't have those different tabs. But you can easily make it open just by right-clicking on it and say, open this link in a new tab. And then you can have access to all the analytics and a new tab in your browser. So you can have this open at the same time as your survey. And do familiarize yourself with these other analytics that are in here. They might provide you some good information to include in your annual reports when you present to your policy committee. I'll move on to the next survey if there's not any questions. This out of state waste data is not applicable to all solid waste management districts. You see, they don't have any information in this one. But if you do have information, the districts have some contract information and are able to provide us usually a level of detail because there's money involved. Then what we get through our facility reports and from our neighboring states like Kentucky and West Virginia send us their data to get our export data to find out what's sent there. But oftentimes you guys will have a better information than we have. So if you do have this information, it's included when we figure out our waste flow data. That brings me down to the implementation schedules. Now, the implementation schedules is the portions of the ADR that are used to evaluate the implementation of your solid waste management plan. And we encourage districts to provide as much information as you can in those surveys to let us know what was happening during the report here. And this first survey, single multi-county, is something that's completed by Ohio EPA just so that it then sets up whether your curbside and drop-off surveys are going to be set up with multiple pages if you're multi-county. And I'll show you here, Belmont Jefferson does not have any curbside programs, but I do. If you add, you can see that type of information that we ask for different curbside programs, and I don't think these are required. These aren't required fields, but if you're able to provide this type of information, we really want to garner this information for reports on our curbside programs across the state, and especially the volume-based billing. If you have some sort of volume-based billing system, whether it be different level of sizes of carts they can get, or if these bags are stickers, encourage you to put that as well as your tonnage and comments. Now, I mentioned for the different pages, you can see this one is associated with Belmont County. So then you would go to the second page up at the top, and this one's associated with Jefferson County. Now, we had to provide 6 for every solid waste management district because that's the maximum amount of counties we have associated with any solid waste district, which there are 2 6-county districts in Ohio. Now, obviously, these 3rd through 6 won't have a county associated with it, but when you save it, you do need a mark complete, and it'll close them all out. Now, and maybe Ernie can help me with this. I'm remembering there was an issue with these, and people get confused sometimes. Like if you don't see it marked complete here, and let me just go ahead and try this for the curbside programs. So if I go in here from the first page and mark save and mark complete, I did mark them all. I marked it as complete. I thought for some reason some people had issues maybe with the way the system used to be set up, that you had to go to the 6th page in order to do that. For drop-offs, we do ask for as specific information as you can. If you can provide the exact address, that's going to help us potentially map these in the future, which is something we have a goal of doing, and we have another system within Retrack that our upstairs neighbors in DEFA utilize to show different recycling locations across the state for things like electronics or lamps and ballasts and those type of things. We have not incorporated this for all the drop-offs in Ohio, but it is a goal we'd like to do. And the sooner we can get this information in here, the better. Obviously, for your purposes of marking things as rural and full-time associates with your access goal, and any comments you have. I do want to really stress this last column here. We were not able to, and this one isn't, there's normally the ability to drop, and I already locked those programs. We want you guys to use this column in order to mark if something goes away, if it is discontinued, or if it's new, mark new. And then when we review the reports, we will remove the program. So that way we're able to track when programs have been removed, and relate it back to your solid waste plan as far as what you indicated you were going to do and how things change. If there's any changes to address and whatnot, well, we have a report that helps us track those, but we encourage you to also use the comment section down here to indicate if those type of changes have been made. You can see here when I reviewed this that I indicated there was one site removed, and also noted that there was some other site changes going on. So when we review it, I at least try to make a note in there to follow through with you guys and let you know that I made those changes. So next up is I want to talk about these 3 surveys at the same time. The residential programs, which include the hard to recycle and the education and outreach, and the grants and incentives. If you go to the instructions, which is all the way at the top, or no, I'm sorry, it's actually within the surveys for these. So if you go into one of these, sorry, that's a lot of moving. It's sort of, I'm not controlling it. There is a survey. Stop it. Click. There you go. Why am I not seeing the instructions in here? Maybe because it's locked. It's not those survey instructions. You go into this. Here we go. Click here for instructions. I'm going to pull up a page from the instructions here. This gives you a list of all your different types of programs you have and where they would fall into those different surveys. So if you look at this first one, that was the initial survey for residential programs, hard to recycle materials. The second one's all your education categories, and then lastly your grants and incentives. Now, the education and outreach does have an additional section you fill out as far as what category, what it is, and these relate to the different categories of whether it be website, social media, or maybe it's working with elected officials. But the reality is probably a third to a half probably fall under the other education. But we do want to pull those out sometimes and see which ones relate specifically to some of the outreach priorities, like the speaker and presenter resource guide, as well as these ones that are specific to different sectors. And also for the material and focus, because sometimes you guys will have specific education programs related to HHW or electronics. So they can be used in any combination, as is noted here. How am I doing on time? Am I getting behind?
Just a little.
Okay. Well, here I'm inside the education. This is a residential program, sorry, right now, and encourage you to put as many comments in here, and really it's quantitative data that we would like to see. You can see here they provided, let us know how many waste audits were performed during the reference year. Let us know how many, if you have something in the education section to let us know how many flyers you made. Really, we do not want a description of the program. That is in your solid waste plan. A lot of people end up just saying what the program is. We already have that information in your solid waste plan. We really want to see what specifically was done during the report year. And 2020 was special. We had a lot of programs, a lot more unusual, that indicated no activity, and that's very understandable. We aren't going to take any action on these, but we do. If you do have no activity, we really want to encourage you to say, well, why wasn't there activity? Do you plan on doing this program in the future? And if so, maybe you need to be looking at some of your outreach activities for that program if people don't know about it. And again, this is your education program. You can see all the material focus. You can select the different focuses as well as the different categories within the education program. Trying to hurry up here. Now, lastly, on all these, when you get down and you have all your surveys that are marked complete, with the exception of the contact information, you'll go into this, this certification and submittal. And then you will once you mark this one as complete, it lets us know that you have finished your ADR. And at that point in time, we can go in and start reviewing it. And if you ever have find out that you have things you wanted to add or you meant to do this, just let us know and we can unlock it for you. It's not a big deal. That's what we're here for. I will switch over to quarterly fee reports now. I went back, so notice I hit the home button up there and went back. Quarterly fee reports. These are in statute on the deadlines for these. And you can see we even put them right next to each survey associated with the different. So if I go into the second quarter here, you can see section 1 is all about your fee levels. These are, you see where it's mentioned, it says manage only. That's because we want to keep these stagnant. If there's any changes to the fee structure for districts, we want to know about them, and you indicate them in this comment box here. And then as we review these, we'll go up and make the changes to your fee structure up here. Section 2 is revenue. When we review these, generation fees, your contract fees, there's this attachment you have to include for generation and contract fees. Oh, I didn't want to do that. I have it open already here. And this does it by facility, so we can see which facility paid you how much for each quarter, and then the total down here at the bottom of this should match up with whatever you report for contracts or generation fees in the corresponding quarter back in the QFR. So I want you to realize, and that's an attachment you include. That information can be found through this link on our webpage. It's an Excel file. I just saved it as a PDF so I could open it up in my browser. And that doesn't show up unless you click yes here. Anything you report as other, please include some information on what that is, and that also goes for the expenditures other. So I'll move down here to the expenditures. Again, there's this other category under planning, other planning implementation schedules. There's another section here to describe what that is. This whole section 3 is divided up into the 10 allowable uses for solid waste district funds. And again, that was just touched on, I think, by Jeff. And this is, again, in statute, there's only 10 allowable uses you're able to spend your fees on. Plan preparation and monitoring is generally going to be for when you write your plan. And I want to talk about these different columns here: district expenses, public contracts, private contracts. If you use a contractor for anything, whether it be for down here, you see your recycling drop-offs. If you contract for your drop-offs to be serviced, it should be going into your private contract column. If you have, say, maybe a municipality that does your drop-offs for you, that would go into the public contracts. And more likely to be reported on public contracts would be your health department funding or your sheriff's and litter enforcement programs. That would all be with another public entity. But some districts tend to use this district expenses for just about everything. And personnel, office overhead, all the, when people call me with questions, I always look to these survey instructions. There are details provided for each of these different expenditure categories on what you can report. But again, I'd feel free to reach out to me, because I'm the QFR guy, and I get questions all the time about where should I report this? Should I put this under public contracts, etc. And I'm glad to field those questions or set up calls. If you're a new coordinator and want to go over this specifically, but category by category, I'm willing to do that. So I don't know if there's any questions. You can go through allowable uses here. Health department enforcement. You see they do fund their health department through their public contracts. County assistance. If you have a landfill within your district, sometimes if the county roads are affected, you can spend money on that through that. Well testing is pretty rare for people to do that. Out of waste inspection, again, very rare to use those categories. open law, litter enforcement. Those people, there are a lot of districts that fund their health departments and their sheriff's departments, and health department training. I believe that's supposed to be for training that Ohio EPA is to develop, and I have not seen any expenditures to that in my years doing this. Municipal township assistance, as well as compensation to affected communities, and those are all defined in statute and also in the survey instructions. So lastly, I want to talk about the fund balance. And this is, before you submit the report, you can use this analytic that's built into the report, and you can see what your fund balance is at the end of your quarter. Now, hopefully this is going to match up with what you guys have on your files and your funds. This corresponds with what you report in section 2 and section 3 for each quarter. At the end of the year, I will be running reports that will have you guys check your fund balance at the end of the year. I don't check it quarter by quarter, but not until we do the fee summary report for the entire year do we do that, and work with your auditor, whatever, to try to get that stuff to match. If it doesn't, then you should go back, first of all, to make certain that the balance at the beginning is correct, but go back and look at your expenditures and revenues and see if there's something that's off that's making it so that doesn't match up. This pass-through grant balance was added as a request by the districts to account for the monies that are given to districts on behalf of an industry or a business, and you guys essentially are the pass-through agency to get those, and that's through the market development grant, which will be discussed directly after this by our folks from the Recycling and Litter Prevention Group. And those grants do have a specific category on where you can report that, your pass-through grants. So those monies will show up in this report. It's the same as the other solid waste fund balance, but it just shows your pass-through grant, and you see that this district does not have one. Districts want to be able to show that not all the money that they have on the books are allocated for their programming, that maybe they're just holding it for someone else just to they get a lot of questions from theirs. I did not talk about this district grants column. This is another category that was added, and it's really at the discretion of you guys if you want to do that. A lot of districts have grant programs, maybe where they fund communities to offset their curbside or drop-off programs. You can use this expenditure column to just better describe how those monies are being spent. And with that, again, we have the ability to upload any attachments on here. If you have fee resolutions for fees that change, if we have comments when we review it, we'll include them there. And I did not unlock this, so I can't show you, but it's essentially the same mark as draft or complete that you would see for the ADR surveys. And that's all I got. I will open it up for questions.
Okay, I'm not seeing anything, but if you do have questions, please feel free to utilize the raise hand feature if you want to speak, or send them in the chat, or email as well. And we can always circle back and catch the questions in a few minutes, but we will move on to our next presentation, which is the grant and loan program that is in our Division of Environmental and Financial Assistance, and we will have Dave Folks and Marie Barnett.
Good morning. Almost afternoon, right? Thank you, Leanne. Dave and I would like to take this opportunity to discuss Ohio EPA's Recycling and Litter Prevention Grant Program. Here is a quick snapshot of the material we will cover today. First, we will cover the 4 grant types within the Recycle Ohio Grant Program, your role as a solid waste district or authority. Then we'll go over some of the updates for 2022. Next, we'll discuss how to access the online application portal. And lastly, we will cover some additional funding and resource opportunities and end with a brief Q&A. Next slide, please. I'm going to start by talking to you about the Community and Litter Grant, which is the most popular of the 4 grant types. This grant covers a variety of projects from tire amnesty events to recycling equipment. Something to note, when using the online application, you should select the government as the applicant type. Historically, the government type was referred to as a community, but now we use the term government so that our agency is using consistent language throughout our funding programs. The Community and Litter Grant has a 25% required match, which is calculated based off the grant amount requested, not the total project cost. The grant has a duration of 1 year and will run from July 1st, 2022 through June 30th of 2023. If funded, the initial payment of 50% is released to the applicant organization on July 1st, 2022, and the remaining funds will be released after a completed electronic closeout report is submitted and approved by Ohio EPA. Please note, all litter cleanup, tire amnesty events, and litter surveillance camera installations must occur on public property. Keep in mind that the Recycle Ohio grant is extremely competitive and grant funds are not guaranteed. Grant funds are intended to supplement, not replace, your existing operating budget. Next slide. The Market Development Grant is for private sector businesses in Ohio to create or expand processing capacity and recycled material production. This also includes equipment used for remanufacturing recyclables into bulk, raw material, or finished product. A business applicant is considered the cooperating enterprise and must have a government sponsor to apply. A government sponsor can be any local government entity. The government sponsor is the grantee for any funded project and is required to apply through the online grant portal. Therefore, businesses should work very closely with their government sponsor throughout the grant process to ensure that the project is successful. This includes updating the government sponsor on the project progress and working with them to close out the grant. If awarded funding, 100% of the grant payment shall be held by Ohio EPA and not forwarded to the government sponsor until all expenditures have been completed, the appropriate invoices and proof of payments are documented, and an Ohio EPA final compliance check is completed. Once the government sponsor receives the payment, the government sponsor will forward the payment in full to the business. The Market Development Grant requires 100% match from the cooperating enterprise and has a 24-month period for project completion. Keep in mind that a Market Development Grant can be closed out anytime in that 24-month period. Financial match must be cash or credit, and using in-kind as funds from the grant awards is prohibited. Please note, grant funds are not available until July 1st, meaning any purchases made prior to July 1 are ineligible for reimbursement. Applicants must follow state of Ohio rules and regulations. Non-compliance will jeopardize the project. Applicants must have a secure project location when awarded. Changing locations after funding could result in a termination of the project. Once awarded, no timeline extensions or grant funding increases will be given. As previously mentioned, grant funds can be used to cover personal service contracts related to the project, but cannot be used to cover existing employee salaries. Next slide, please. The Scrap Tire Grant for a business is similar to the Market Development Grant, but with a focus on scrap tires. This grant program offers businesses, for example, manufacturers, scrap tire recovery facilities, and material processors, funding to create or expand scrap tire processing capacity and product manufacturing. Like the Market Development Grant, business applicants must have a government sponsor and should work closely with their sponsor throughout the grant process to ensure that the project is successful. This includes updating the sponsor on the project progress and working with them to close out the grant. For a business, the reimbursement of a grant is the same as the Market Development Grant. If awarded funding, 100% of the grant shall be held by Ohio EPA and not forwarded to the government sponsor until all expenditures have been completed. The appropriate invoices and proof of payments are documented, and an Ohio EPA final compliance check is completed. Once the government sponsor receives the payment, it will forward the payment in full to the business. Grantees have 24 months to complete the project with 100% cash match. Under the Scrap Tire Grant, funds are also available for local governments and nonprofits to complete beneficial use projects that incorporate the use of ground tire rubber, also known as GTR. Just as a reminder, this does not include tire amnesty events, which are covered under the Community and Litter Grant. If awarded, an initial payment of 50% is released to local governments and nonprofits on July 1, and the remaining funds are released after the completed electronic closeout report is submitted and approved by Ohio EPA. Government entities cannot apply for scrap tire manufacturing projects. That is only available to businesses. Grantees have 24 months to complete the project with 100% cash match. As mentioned previously, grant funds can be used to cover personal service contracts related to the project, but cannot be used for covering existing employee salaries. As with the previous grant types, funds are not available until July 1st, and purchases prior to this date are ineligible for reimbursement. Next slide, please. The next grant is the Academic Institution Grant. The intent of the Academic Institution Grant is to help engage schools in recycling efforts. This grant is available to both public and private schools within Ohio, including colleges and universities. Much like the Community and Litter Grant, the Academic Institution Grant covers the purchase of equipment rental for litter cleanup, signage, litter disposal fees, advertisements and marketing, tools and supplies, and site improvements related to the project. Contracts covering the cost necessary for services of public or private contractors are also eligible, including site improvement for scrap tire civil engineering construction projects. Again, salary or benefits for in-house employees are not an allowable expense. Costs not covered by this grant are very similar to the previous list under Community and Litter. Grant and match funds cannot be used on these types of expenses. Budgeting for these items with grant and/or match dollars will make your application ineligible. Next slide, please. What is your role as a solid waste management district? You can be a grantee. You can get a Community and Litter grant up to $200,000 for certain projects. Some projects can be combined that fall within the $100,000 threshold. In other words, you can't ask for two projects that equal $100,000. The only time you can combine the projects is if the total of the two projects together combined are $100,000 or less. You can also be reached out, and a business can reach out to you and ask you to be a government sponsor. You are still considered the grantee, but that is a market development or scrap tire project. You can serve as the sponsor to the private business, and the business will become the cooperating enterprise, and you will work closely together. Assistance. Nonprofits and academic institutions are new to the Recycling and Litter Prevention Grant Program. We have many nonprofit organizations and academic institutions applying for a grant, but might not be familiar with local recycling and litter prevention resources provided by their solid waste management district. This is where you may be able to provide assistance and answer questions related to their project. Sometimes when we talk to them, these potential grantees, they are unaware of their local solid waste management districts and what they can provide. We always recommend that at least they check in with you before starting a grant project. Next slide. What is a government sponsor? A business applicant is considered the cooperating enterprise and have a government sponsor to apply. As mentioned in the previous slides, you could be asked to be a government sponsor. As a sponsor, the Solid Waste Management District would be the grantee for any funded project that is required to apply through the online grant portal. Therefore, businesses should work closely with their solid waste district throughout the grant process to ensure that the project is and working with them to close out the grant. If awarded funding, 100% of the grant payment shall be held by Ohio EPA and not forward to the Solid Waste Management District, you would be the grantee, until all expenditures have been completed. The appropriate invoices and proof of payments are documented, and an EPA final compliance check is completed. Once the Solid Waste Management District, the grantee, receives the payment, the grantee shall forward the payment in full to the business, which is considered the cooperating enterprise. Next slide, please. In 2021, we funded a total of 103 grant projects. As you can see from this slide, 77 were community and litter, and we funded about $3.3 million. The academic institution, we funded 9 projects for close to $500,000. The market development grant, we funded 12 projects for $1.75 million. And in scrap tire 5, and we awarded close to $639,000, which totaled 103 projects for a funding amount of $6.2 million. Generally, our funding authority is for $4 million. Last year was unique. We were given $2 million extra money to award from the controlling board. So we were able to award $6 million last year. But generally, and we expect in 2021 to fund around $4 million. And with that ends my portion of the presentation. And I would like to pass it over to Mr. Folks.
Thanks, Marie. And good, I guess it's still morning, right? We're not to lunch yet. Good morning, everybody. Real quickly, I think there's a couple questions that came in, and I think Leanne's going to read them, and we'll address them at the end. And I was just going to kind of finish up our presentation area if we have a little time, which I think we do, because Chet told us we do. Ernie and I are going to briefly expand on the contamination project that we're wrapping up, or that is wrapped up. So a couple things for the 2020 grant cycle, and I think some of the names on her look familiar. I think you guys attended our grant kickoff webinar yesterday, and if you didn't, it'll be recorded, and we're going to run another one on January 6th. So, but we talked about one of the biggest changes to this cycle is we added an eligible grant project category for community litter grant for doing curbside contamination projects, similar to what was done with the recycling partnership. And, the goal here is one of the requirements is that we ask the community at Litter Applying to try to follow that, kit and build that into their project proposal. You can download it at recycleohio.gov. You can see new at the top. It says Contamination Reduction Toolkit. And I think we provided to Jeff and Chet. So after the fact, when we forwarded the PowerPoint presentations to everybody in the group, we can get you that too. It's just a 10-page PDF. You can kind of see the screenshots here. If you want to learn more about it beyond what Ernie and I are going to talk about a little later on before lunch, we have our contact with the Recycle Partnership, Jill Martin, which many of you might be familiar with. I've heard her name before because she's spoken at some of our other events in the past, like the Partners Conference. She's going to do a webinar on next Tuesday at 10 a.m. Feet on the Street webinar, basically kind of going over the same details, going into a little more detail about the results of the project. And you can get to it from our website and register if you're interested in attending. A couple other changes we did, which we actually did for 2021 cycle, but now you're required to do an online closeout report for the grant if you're funded and you're wrapping up your project. You're going through the same application portal, your same login credentials as you did when you applied for the grant. So the only challenge is if somebody else is doing a closeout report than the person that applied. And you can work with us to make sure that we change the contact information and put that as the application contact. Because we do know some projects take a year, or some of the market development projects where the sponsor is required to fill out the application, where there might be changes. We did update a few of the questions, some of the wording, the narrative questions that you get depending on your project. And I think the big thing is we try to reorganize. There's a target materials table, which many of the projects get, especially if you're doing, purchasing equipment, MRF expansion, curbside drop off, those types of things. We updated that target materials kind of make a little more sense, or we hope it makes sense. So we want your feedback on that one. And then, of course, just a reminder, our staff is available to review your draft, project proposal. We do ask, we kind of put a deadline 2 weeks before the grant closes on January 21st that you get it to us before then, because they kind of pile up. We don't review, we don't score it like the technical review team, but we will kind of look through it and make sure that you're covering everything, and make, just give feedback based on our experience that if you're missing any details or if you need to provide more things. So, and it usually is helpful. We and it helps us too, because we get to identify projects ahead of time and kind of see what's coming down the pipeline on this grant cycle. Real quickly, how to apply. This is another transition that's going on for all of Ohio EPA. Right now, if you go to the main epa.ohio.gov page, you click on that little infographic of a man and a woman for a customer support center, and that'll take you to our customer service page where you can set up an account or access your existing account to start an application. We recommend any browser that's updated except for Microsoft Explorer, or when because that is not supported. So, Chrome, Firefox, and Edge. One twist in this is we're in the process of all Ohio state government, are switching to this new Innovate Ohio web platform. So if any of you have been on the Department of Health website, Ohio Department of Health website, it's going to look like that. And you still access the same look, the same address, it's just a new look. You'd still go to epa.ohio.gov, and the Access to Customer Support Center button is at the bottom where they get started. And that page, I think, is being launched on December 3rd. So it's coming up. But just want to let you know if anybody's in there trying to access it. Right now, it looks like our current website, but in a month, it's going to look a little different. If you go to our recycleohio.gov page, which that will kind of look the same, we'll still have these same tabs. If you click on the grants tab and under resources and publications, there's a start an application button. That'll take you to the customer service portal to apply. And we also have all our fact sheets and information about this current grant cycle. Quick about the schedule. It opened this week. It just opened on Monday. So we don't have any applications yet. We don't expect it, but usually they start trickling in at the end of this month and in December, and it really start flowing in January, of course. We are, like I mentioned previously, we are doing another grant information webinar, pretty much similar to what we did yesterday. We might tweak it a bit based on questions and feedback we have from the attendees yesterday, and that's on January 6th I think it's a Wednesday or Thursday. And you can sign up for that going to our recycleohio.gov page. There's a calendar that revolves on the upper right-hand corner, and you'll see the January 6th button, and you click on it, and it takes you to the registration page. Grant review deadline, already covered that, the 21st. The online grant application closes February 4th at 4 p.m. I don't recommend you're in there at 4. I recommend that you get in there before then. But if you're, and try to, submit before that deadline, you can't log in after that because it'll be closed. So we always have people in there at the last minute. That's fine, but hopefully you have an application started and you're just finishing things up. For the for the solid waste management districts that you're going to be the grantee and the sponsor for either a scrap tire grant for business or a market development grant, they have to submit their business documentation separately, but you want to work with them, making them aware of this, and we give them a week until after the grant deadline closes. So this is February 11th to submit their 4 pieces of financial information. And of course, then we do all the dirty work behind the scenes from February 4th on. The goal is, of course, the reward funding on July 1. If the project scores well and it's approved by the director, then that's where that cycle starts. A couple of things really quick. I will throw these in. Additional funding opportunities. We've had these before when we've done this presentation, but the Ohio Air Quality Development Authority has grants to 30% of the equipment cost, limit up to $30,000. That contribute to air quality, but that might impact some recycling operations, some equipment on that side of things. So it's just something to look into. You can access it on their website right there, airquality.ohio.gov. OWDA, it sounds interesting. It's Ohio Water Development Authority, but they actually have a solid waste loan program, and I believe pretty sure Union County, at least in NCO, I think has utilized this funding mechanism. And there's probably a couple other solid waste districts that have too, but they offer assistance for acquisition and construction of solid waste facilities. So there's actually a question on here, I believe, stealing Leon's thunder from Scioto County about acquiring facilities, and we can get in a little more, but our grant fund doesn't fund building structures, it funds the equipment. But this could be a funding mechanism if they're looking to acquire the actual, like the building itself. So just something to think about. And then the final one, it's from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, rural development, and they have solid waste management grants too. But there's restrictions on this population size, so it'd probably fit more with some of the smaller populated rural solid waste management districts. But they do offer technical assistance and training to improve planning and management of solid waste sites. And then here's a snapshot of our team. We've added you see two of us today, but there's other people on our team that aren't at this training. We added a new environmental specialist too, Jessica Dozal. She just started last Monday, and then of course many of you are familiar with Travis. He's been promoted, and we're happy for him. But he's back over full time in our recycling and sustainability unit. So many of you probably talked to him when you're trying to apply for a grant. So we're happy to have them all there. And with that, I guess we'll take a couple questions, and then Chet's told us we got to do another quick presentation before lunch. So we'll answer our questions quick. So Leanne?
Well, I think you kind of got both of them that were in the chat, right?
I missed there. There was one in the chat. Hold on. I'm sorry. Let me look at it.
I answered Jane's. We didn't answer the first one.
Okay. Yeah. So market development grant. Oh, you answered Jane. So yeah. So the market development grant, Jane, is only for businesses, but for a nonprofit, the nonprofit can apply for the community litter grant up to $100,000 for equipment if they're looking for equipment. So there is an option for a nonprofit if they're doing recycling or refurbishing or recovering materials. That's where they'd go. Rick's question, Rick Jansen's question is yes, if you're the grant, it kind of depends on the definition of a MRF. I meant to check with Ernie, but it's the $200,000 threshold is meant for a MRF, a material recovery facility, a recycling center, where there's some kind of sorting processing going on, not just like a transfer station. So, but in your case, if you're collecting them and doing kind of some sorting, it would fit under there. You could technically apply for a $200,000 grant for the equipment that goes into both locations. But the grant does not cover the building structure itself. If you're putting in a concrete pad for a baler or a sorting line or optical line or running electrical, that is the kind of the limitation of the supporting infrastructure you build around a piece of equipment. It's got to be that. It can't be the building itself. So hopefully that answers that question.
Okay, and then Marcy Kreth has a question.
Hi, Marcy.
Hello. First, I want to just say how great it is to work with this team. And I'm not saying that just because they hand out money, but I think as new coordinators, it's important to recognize the responsibility as your administrator here. And I would just humbly recommend, if you're new to this process and you hope to be a sponsor for businesses, that you get a resolution or something passed from your policy committee or board of trustees, or however your structure allows it to be, where you have the ability to apply on their behalf. Sometimes that process slows down the grant application process, and some of the businesses find that frustrating. So just having that infrastructure in place as a blanket would be a recommendation I would suggest. Thank you for letting me say that.
Excellent point, Marcy. Excellent point.
Yeah, Marcy, actually, and I know we're running out of time to do the other thing, but we actually rely on Marcy a lot because of her experience, and like we've talked to Hamilton County because they have a lot of experience too, and Stark Tuss Wayne too, with being a sponsor. And with our grant expanding, we have other government entities coming into the fold that want to be a sponsor, and there's no reason they can't be, but there are steps and there are things that, we're trying to formalize a little more, and I might even lean on some of our past sponsors to be mentors in some way to kind of like and get more steps in. So like Marcy said, we can build in the lead time so there's not a delay if the funding's approved and the project can kick off on July 1. So that was a great point. And Marcy, you're reading my mind. Like we'll probably be talking to you again down the road to get your feedback for suggestions and kind of best management practices for being a sponsor. So,
but please feel free to reach out to anybody on the list that Dave has on the screen there. We're happy to answer any questions you have or walk you through it. Generally, the questions that you have, we've probably seen before, but not always. So, reach out to us. That's what we're here for, is to assist you. And we really appreciate that. Taking the time to listen to our presentation. Some of you might have attended this yesterday, so we apologize for the dual information. But if you have any specific questions, please don't hesitate to reach out via email. Is generally the best way we can respond quickly. So we really appreciate your time. And I just wanted to point out, if you take a look at this last slide here, you see Dave's just playing around and waving while Marie's in the recycle bin doing all the works. So I just kind of wanted to point that out.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing any more questions or any hands raised. So I guess we'll move into our bonus presentation.
Bonus.
With Dave and Ernie.
Ernie Stoll, you have to go fast.
Yep, we'll make this fast. So
I got it up here.
So Dave made reference to a new grant category that they have, which is for anti-contamination campaigns. We did one in Ohio over the last couple of years because contamination in residential recyclables is a huge problem right now. So we did this Feet on the Street campaign, which involved people actually going around looking in people's recycling bins, hanging tags on them to tell them when they were doing things wrong, and then rejecting their carts until they cleaned it up. So go ahead, Dave. It was a collaboration amongst a number of different people. So if you're not familiar with the Recycling Partnership, they're a national organization, nonprofit, that gets money from private businesses like Coca-Cola and Pepsi to help further recycling in the country. They're a nationwide organization. We awarded them about $320,000. There was additional matching fund that were put up by waste companies that were involved in the project. We partnered with solid waste districts, MRFs, and communities to make this happen. And overall, the goal was to improve the quality of curbside recycling by thinking kind of system-wide from both the MRF and the curb to come up with a solution, and also to provide kind of a recipe for more communities to be able to do this in the future. Go ahead, Dave. We originally wanted to hit all 4 of the major material recovery facilities in Ohio. We actually only hit 3, representing 2 of the waste companies, Rumpke and Waste Management. We wanted to target 155,000 households. We were looking at maybe 4 communities. We hit 6 communities, almost reaching that household goal. It actually worked out better this way because we originally thought we were going to focus on big communities, but we were able to do communities of different sizes. And we learned a lot from this, and Dave's going to go over the importance of engagement. But the communities worked with were Fairfield Township, Centerville, Cincinnati, Columbus, Gahanna, and Akron. Go ahead, Dave. These are all the partners. You can see it was us, the Recycling Partnership, the waste companies, and all of the public groups that were involved, solid waste districts, and the communities.
Thanks, Ernie. We're going quick because we don't want to cut everybody's lunch, but this is kind of a snapshot of, like Ernie was referring to, the one of the key unique things about the Feet in the Street or the tagging program is the engagement, and it's the direct engagement with the people, the residents of that community that participate in curbside recycling. And it's not only that, like the outreach goes to everybody, even ones that opt out or don't participate. But it's the key part is the critical part is the direct engagement at the curb. And these are some of these are familiar to you folks, because some of you on the call were the communities that were involved in it, in this pilot project. But you can see some of the pictures we have, like of the Feet in the Street crew and the quick cart inspection where they get out ahead of the truck the day of the route and check the carts and do the audit and make a decision if it was the first time. Some communities is rejected right away. Some waited until the second visit, but there was a certain amount of visits they do. There's an example of the tag that they hang on the cart. There's some of the literature that they up above the gentleman inspecting the cart where they can, mail out or provide or hang on the door. And it's also part of the social media. It's all built in. So again, engagement's critical. Communicating with everybody, letting everybody know what you're doing, having everybody on board. Here's a brief snapshot of the outcomes. Overall, you saw great reductions in all the different projects. The Columbus number is a little lower. I think the reductions were actually higher. This is just a learning lesson on the pre and post data sort that they do. The pre and post sort of like right off the back of the truck, off the route. The method they did was different versus the first one versus the second. I believe so. I think their numbers will be even higher because we had anecdotal discussions with the contractor, the Feet in the Street contractor, and there was a lot of improvement. So, but overall, you see 40% or higher reductions on most of the projects. And then also, like Ernie said, it's important because you can see that success can happen with different types of communities. Like Fairfield or Centerville had a decent contaminant, it was below 20%, but they still had a 42% reduction. So some of the data is still out there because we did a phase 2. So some of the data like from Gahanna and Akron we're still pulling in because they did the tagging a little later this past summer. So, and once we get that data, we'll be able to share that. So what's next? And I actually put it in the chat. I think Ernie already put in a chat about the Recycle Partners website, and I put a link to our contamination toolkit. But the end product was a kit and a video that we could give the Ohio communities an Ohio playbook, right? That this is replicable like in other communities. Well, we have the kit up on the website. I put it here. You can download it off our website at recycleohio.gov or forward that link to any of your communities that are doing curbside. And again, we talked about it. It's an eligible grant category for next cycle. We do expect, we want the communities to follow the kit, follow the action plans, the AMPs, and it's different than just an ordinary education and outreach project category where you're doing recycle right stuff. This is needs to have the kind of the inspection component and the cart, the Feet in the Street component to make it impactful. And again, I mentioned, and I think I put this in the chat too, or I'm starting to put it in the chat. I'll put in the chat a link to the attend the webinar next week with Jill Martin, Feet in the Street, if anybody's more interested. Some of you that were at a partners conference, she's going to kind of do the same thing, but it's going to be in a webinar format. So if you want to forward it to any of your communities that couldn't be down at the partners conference in person down at Chillicothe last month, this is where they can attend and ask questions. And then finally, you've seen this slide before, and this is our contact, and we have a couple minutes left. And let me put in the Feet in the Street webinar in chat too. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Dave and Ernie? I am not seeing anything. So with that, we will get ready and break for lunch. One important thing to remember is when you come back for the second part of today's training, it is going to be a new meeting and a new meeting link. That link was emailed out in the original invite, but we're going to put it in the chat of this meeting as well. If you accidentally join the wrong meeting, we'll pop over and get you where you need to be. But with that, we'll see everyone back at 1 p.m.